actually tomorrow morning. It's my first meeting of the day.
We are live.
Thank you, Cynthia. Good evening and welcome to the August 10th Special Council meeting. It's due to COVID-19 and recommendations by Waterloo Regional Public Health to exercise social distancing and public gathering thresholds that the Township Council meetings are currently being held electronically. Members of the public may watch and/or participate in the open meeting electronically using any of the following methods. Watch the live stream by accessing the meeting on the Township's YouTube page. Members of the public interested in attending as an observer or wish to speak to any item listed under item 4, items for consideration, were asked to submit their request in writing to the Clerk's Division before 6 p.m. on August 9th. A link and telephone number has been provided to those who registered before the registration deadline. Members of the public were invited to submit written comments to the Clerk's Division, which were provided to the Mayor and Clerk prior to the meeting and will form part of the public records. I'd now like to call the meeting to order, and with the understanding that Councillor Osner sent his regrets. And I would like the motion for approval of the agenda, please.
Certainly. So moved by Councillor Gillespie, seconded by Councillor Rollman, that Council adopt the August 10th special council meeting agenda as presented. Councillor Rollman?
Yes.
Councillor McCurry?
Yes.
Councillor Gillespie?
Yes.
And Mayor Foxton?
Yes,
That carries.
thank you. And is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof? Seeing none, items for consideration. CO McNeely, did you want to speak now?
No, Madam Mayor, we have a short presentation for the second staff report.
Okay, so report items for consideration, report number FIN 22-2021, the 2022 budget direction and schedule. So there's a motion here on the schedule. Was there any conflicting dates for anyone that had a problem with these dates? Seeing none. Ms. Sage, I'm not going to make you read the whole thing unless anyone wishes her to read the whole thing. Okay, you please present without reading it in its entirety.
Certainly, Mayor Foxton. So moved by Councillor McCurry and seconded by Councillor Rollman that FIN report number 22-2021 be received, and that's as presented in the staff report. Councillor Rollman?
Yes.
Councillor McCurry?
Yes.
Councillor Gillespie?
Yes.
Mayor Foxton?
Yes, thank you.
That carries.
Oh, there you are. Okay, report number 4.2, report number finance 2021 preliminary discussions and overview, first draft 10-year capital forecast. Andrew, CO McNeely would like to make a brief presentation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So in a moment, Christine is going to share her screen. We have a brief PowerPoint presentation. We want to highlight some key elements that were in the associated staff report on the 10-year capital forecast, with the hope that that will frame some discussions amongst council in a roundtable type format. Staff is available. The directors are here. And if there's any specific, after we've gone through our presentation and we've had that discussion on some of those key elements that we wish to focus council's attention on, if there's any specific questions that members of council have about a project or priorities within a specific department, the directors are here, and everyone's equipped to answer questions that council may have on the 10-year forecast and projects that may be identified within their respective departments. Chief Shantz was not available tonight. He's still on holidays, but I'd be more than happy to answer questions related to the fire department if that would provide assistance to Township Council. So if I could call upon Ms. Brox to start us off with the presentation.
Thanks. So this is just a brief highlight of what is in the
Excel spreadsheets that we were sent to, that we received both a PDF copy and the printed 11:17 versions. But it's a lot of data in there. And what CEO McNeely and I felt was that we would be able to provide a brief overview that would allow for the discussion. This is the 10-year capital forecast that you would have seen a version of this back in January when we were setting the 2021 budget. We have extended it to 2031 to be the next 10-year period. And it has some impacts on both 2022's budget as well as beyond. And the direction from council is what we're looking for to make sure that we position the township to be successful over the next 10 years. Again, the model we attempted to, we've shown is when looking at funding for the capital, we've let you know where we believe there would be grants available, where we would use taxation dollars, and in an attempt to smooth out any impacts to tax rates in any current years. Most of our capital projects now are being funded through reserves, where we would raise the funds by taxation and transfer it into the reserves in that budget year, and then draw from the reserves as required. Some of the key changes from what you would have seen the last time, of course, is, as I mentioned, the 2031 being added. That, of course, will have an impact as we forecast out replacement of vehicles and other equipments that would be required in 2031. We have also forecasted out a standard inflation rate throughout the 10 years. So when we have had actual either 2019 dollars or current dollars, we have then taken an inflation rate to project out what the cost would be over the next 10 years.
Christine, can I interject for a second?
Absolutely.
Did you say, Impact is doing their assessment, I believe, 2022?
Impact is possibly delaying that to 2023.
Okay. The only thing is that it's going to be a huge difference because it will be with the new property values.
So it's revenue neutral to the township. So it's really more of an allocation between the different properties. Where we will experience is we have a lot of growth in the municipality. So as new properties get developed, the Gore subdivision being a recent one, that will absolutely impact our ability to raise taxation.
So if Impact assesses a house that was assessed at 300,000 and now it's assessed at $1 million, would that not impact the individual house owner's taxes, because that's based on then the rate is set by Impact, and it could be the same rate?
The individuals will be impacted for certain, but if residential goes up, then potential commercial or farm will go down. So it's not as a big impact overall to the township, but it's absolutely going to be an impact on the individual ratepayers of the township.
That's what I wanted to keep in everybody's mind as we go through with this, is that all of us are going to be hit when Impact reassesses, and they were supposed to do this in 2016, so it's been put off a long time. That it's going to be a huge impact on the homeowners. I'm sorry, Christine, carry on.
Absolutely. So in the version presented back in January, our total capital campaign was $112 million, and now it's $121 million. The largest areas of focus are in our infrastructure program, and then the facilities program as well is a significant dollar value as well. For those of you who are more graphically oriented, we have broken down the information into a pie chart to show the impact. As you can see, the facilities over the next 10 years, it's forecasted $58 million, infrastructure at $40 million, and parks, trails, fleets, and then the studies and minor equipment purchases as well. In terms of funding, Again, really, there's only a few sources of actual revenues to the township. We have our user fees, our taxation, and our grants. But as we put those taxation dollars into a reserve, we will then draw from the reserves to cash flow. So over the course of the 10 years, we will be drawing from our reserves, from our development charges, from our government grants, from community support and taxation to pay for the capital program. I also note that we are looking at 3 major capital projects that would require us to take on additional debt. And again, when you take on debt at the township for these capital projects, it's really just a cash flow so that the users of the assets or the facilities can pay for it during the year. In terms of taxation funding, again, we're seeing a steady increase into what we are hoping to transfer to reserves. As we have already previously spoken about, as our assessment grows, as we take on new development and new subdivisions, the ability to raise taxation is spread over a larger population, and that allows for us to put aside more funds. We are trying to limit the amount of current year taxation dollars that are going directly to capital purchases, but instead spread it out through the use of the reserves. And you can also see that some of our taxation dollars will have to go to fund the repayment of debt in regards to these capital projects.
If I could just add to Christina's statement, as a general statement, on an average annual basis over the 10-year period, the increase in taxation from year to year is approximately 2% over the planning horizon. Now, that number is based on what we know as assessment today. And obviously, as the township continues to grow each year, both our industrial, commercial, institutional, as well as our residential assessment base will grow. And that average annual 2% could be slightly lower because of that additional assessment growth from year to year.
Andrew and Christine, this is excellent. Rod, you
I have a quick question of the treasurer and CAO. Does it make sense to continue to push debt financing off into the future when we know right now interest rates are historically low? Should we be looking at moving some of our projects forward and taking advantage of the low interest rate as opposed to waiting 2 or 3 years and then the rates could be a lot higher? That's just for a devil's advocate question, I guess.
So knowing that question was probably going to come about debt, because we have not incurred debt, we actually have a debt slide which speaks to key projects. So as you know, we have an historic debenture for the creation of the North Dumfries Community Complex. That current debt obligation, the last payment is at the end of fiscal year 2024. We have identified some other debt finance projects. Some are being funded internally. Others, we would actually be going through the region and securing external debt. The reality is it's all contemplated as debt, whether it's internal or an external buy in the marketplace. So Christine is actually going to speak a little bit about debenturing, what projects are being targeted for debt financing, how we propose to fund it. And Councillor Rollman, to your point, we do believe, and we've just received notification from the region for fiscal year 2022, the debenture obligations are slightly below 3%. We have, for the purposes of our financial model, used 3%. So we're slightly higher than what we've been quoted, but we've been very conservative in all of our estimations. And we've used a 20-year horizon to repay our debts for the various projects. So Ms. Brox is going to speak a little bit about what projects are proposed to be debt financed, how we propose to fund it, the time period in which we've shown it. My one cautionary note is sometimes there is lead work to be done before we can actually do the physical build. So for example, if we're talking about the Twin Pad Arena, we actually have to start doing an engineering and architectural design and then go to the marketplace. It's not an instantaneous transaction. So the earlier we deal with some projects, especially some of that lead preparatory work, will allow us to move those projects forward and hopefully take advantage of what have been historically low interest and financing rates. So I'm just going to return it back to Ms. Brox, and hopefully some of the questions that you have about debt financing and what it looks like will be clarified through this slide.
So as CEO McNeely has indicated, we've identified 3 new projects that would require debt financing to continue with, and that is the Town Hall project, the new Public Works Depot, and the Twin Pad Arena project. Now, with those, presuming that the timing that's in our forecast, we would be taking out debt for the town hall in 2022 with the repayments starting in 2023. The Public Works Depot project is scheduled to be, the debt is scheduled to be taken out in 2023 with repayments starting in 2024. And the Twin Pad is scheduled for 2025 with repayments the following year. Looking at the series of debt, we've identified the opportunity to use some of the funds from the Energy Plus annual income through our dividends and our interest to allow us to repay some of the debt. And then the rest of the projects would be raised through taxation dollars. So this current version of the forecast has indicated that we would start by using the Energy Plus reserve to repay the debt. And then as the township takes on additional debt for the next projects, we would be using taxation dollars. You will also see development charges on the schedule, and that is because the original construction of the NDCC allowed us to draw from a portion from development charges. In the beginning, because the township had not actually collected sufficient development charge fees at the time, it wasn't utilized, but now we're repaying ourselves by drawing on the development charges fees to pay for the last of the debt. I also would like to point out that for 2021, the annual repayment limit was 1.9 million approximately. And you can see that the total cost of the debt is well within that repayment limit.
So if I could just add to Ms. Brock said about the annual repayment limit. Each year that's calculated and we're provided the number from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. And obviously, as the township continues to grow, as our assessment base continues to grow, our annual repayment limit, or ARL, increases because it's part of our own source income generated through taxation. Using just the 2021 repayment limit as published on this slide, you can see that we're allowed to spend up to $1.955 million in terms of repayment of principal and interest on debt. Certainly that would not be advisable as a funding strategy, but we are generally around 30% of our permissible amount through this 10-year period based on the 2021 ARL valuation. So obviously, as we get deeper into the decade, as our assessment base grows, our debt exposure actually becomes smaller in terms of our permissible allowance, although the number in terms of what we actually pay out for principal and interest remains fixed at approximately $600,000 per annum. So this is a snapshot to show you projects that we've modeled to utilize debt financing over the 10-year period and how we propose to fund them through various means of funding, as well as the projected timelines for drawing upon debenture. And as Ms. Brox has indicated, in the construction year, we do not take the debt. The payment starts the first year after project completion. So as you can see, there's always a bit of a stagger between project commencement and the first payment of debenture.
Can I ask, the twin pad, is it not eligible for development charges?
Madam Mayor, no, it's not, because it's a replacement for the existing ice surface at the ACC. So today we have 2 ice surfaces. If we twin, we would still have 2 ice surfaces, because the premise is that the existing ice surface at the ACC would not be required.
So
The-
if we left the ACC open and we opened the twin and we left it open for a few months, could we charge the development charges on it?
No, we'd be challenged on a shell game. And
Oh.
our strategy that we completed last year indicated that we do not need 3 ice surfaces as a community based on our population modeling, as well as uptake for ice usage.
And this is all based on a taxation of that 2% that we talked about?
It's based on our assumption that on average over the 10-year period, we are increasing the amount into the capital by 2%, yes,
That's
from
what it's supposed to.
taxation.
So we will be charging an additional 2% each year. I wanted to make sure that people understand that it would be ongoing.
Yes.
For how many years? 10?
Over this forecasted period, it is, yes.
Thank you.
And that's based on today's assessment valuations and pool of money. And as the township continues to grow each year, that will influence and marginally reduce that 2% threshold.
Correct. Does that include, so was that not including not only the twinning of but the pool and the pump track? Is that included in that 2%?
So we're going to be getting to that in a moment, but the pool is not proposed to be debt financed. We have shown alternative revenue streams to complete that project, but it is one of the items that we wanted to talk to council about as part of our next round of slides. And then projects like the pump track are another range of projects that we need to speak to council about. And there's another slide in today's presentation.
These slides are excellent. I want to tell you, they're great. Thank you very much. Carry on.
I will note that was going to be the version of these forecasts you saw in January indicated that we would be taking on debt for the pool on the assumption that we would be able to secure senior government funding for the pool, which again, I have to stress at this time, we have no commitments or anything, but the hope would be that we would be able to secure 2/3 funding for that. Development charges, community support. We did not feel that we needed to undertake debt financing of that project at this time.
Excellent.
So speaking of the pool, the major, I don't know if I want to call them marquee or significant projects in the 10-year capital forecast are the 4 listed on the screen. So it is that the potential to build a new town hall, the potential to renovate and expand at the Public Works Depot, the twinning of the ice pad at the NDCC, and then the indoor pool. These 4 projects with the timelines listed take up a significant amount of our capital funding and really impact our ability to be flexible on other projects. So we just wanted to highlight them to council as your direction towards these projects is significant.
So as it relates specifically to the Public Works Depot renovation expansion and the growth-related road projects. So I want to stress
Yes.
growth-related projects. So as you may recall in the capital forecast and in earlier discussions, we're taking portions of the Brant Waterloo Road from Trustler Road right through to Spraggs Road and improving that road surface. And then there was also that link on Reedsville Road from Brant Waterloo up to Wrigley. Those are the majority of the growth-related, road-related projects. The growth-related road projects are exclusively funded from development charges. And so every time we issue a residential building permit for a new home, or there's a new industrial, commercial, institutional building, we charge and collect development charges consistent with the township's background study that was adopted in 2020 and the bylaw that's now in effect for the next 5-year period. And it's broken into several categories, including this issue related to public works. The public works account through development charges collects funds for new pieces of rolling stock that are attributed to public works associated with growth. The renovation and expansion of the Public Works Depot at 1168 Greenfield Road, and those growth-related road projects I mentioned just a moment ago. A number of these projects are front-ended in the first part of this decade. Obviously, that growth is occurring over the next 10 to 12 years. So there's a lag in collection funding through growth to offset the cost of some of these growth-related projects within the public works discipline area.
CEO McNeely, can I stop you for a second? Margaret, can you raise your hand and let me see if you pop up to the top? Because the way this is set up, I don't see you. Can you just raise your hand to see if you pop up? You do. Thank you very much. I just want to make sure if you raise your hand, I can see you. Carry on, Andrew.
So what we're concerned about, and if you look at your spreadsheets for the infrastructure related elements, those growth related projects, we very quickly go into a deficit in the development charges portion attributed to those growth related projects. And it's just by the quantum of the cost of those projects and how they're all sequenced and grouped together in the first part of this decade. At the end, they'll be balanced, but there's going to be financial hardship doing all of those growth-related public works projects in this 10-year forecast. And what it will mean is a couple of things. We can't do them all. We cannot internally finance them. We just don't have that extra revenue internally to bridge finance them because of our other commitments to other projects in the 10-year capital forecast. So what it will mean is some of those growth-related road projects will have to be extended out beyond the current 10-year forecast period of 2031. Now, we have shown a conservative contribution each year to the Public Works DC account. We have modeled in $22, the equivalent of a contribution each year from growth of $800,000 for the Public Works development charge collection. That's based on the premise of annually of 125 new residential building starts each year. Over the period of the decade, we've just increased that 800,000 by a 2% inflationary factor. But we've generally kept that premise of 125 homes and today's dollar value of 800,000. We have done that purposely as a conservative approach because there's so many external factors that influence growth and obviously development. Some of those factors are outside of our control. The background report for the development charges that was undertaken by Watson and Associates last year on behalf of the township believed that growth in terms of new residential building starts for the first 5 years, starting in 22, would be equivalent to 150 homes per annum. And in the back 5 years of the 10-year forecast would grow to 245 households per year. So obviously, if the Watson model is realized, the contributions then of development charges to the public works account would grow significantly and obviously provide revenue to complete more projects without having to incur a deficit amount in that fund. Staff continue to work on a sensitivity review and analysis, and that will certainly form part of our 22 draft budget submission to council later this calendar year as we embark upon in earnest 22 budget deliberations. But I wanted to flag that for you because you will see in the spreadsheet a deficit in the development charge public works account, and it's just the order of magnitude of the projects and their cost, but a conservative approach to income generated through growth.
This is also the first year of that new development charges study. So again, as we hit the end of the year, we will also be able to see how many starts were in it compared to what their modeling was. But for now, we didn't want to promise something that we couldn't deliver. The other thing to note is that several of these projects are in sequence. So if we are twinning the ice surfaces at the NDCC, then that would also lead us to need to do something with the ACC. So the adaptive reuse of the ACC project would have to be undertaken, assuming that the twinning was in fact done. So a few projects are tied together and in that order sequence.
As it relates to the indoor pool, if I could just go back to that one
Sure.
slide, you'll see that right now we have identified $19 million in 2028 assigned to the indoor pool. That number has to be segregated into 2 different time intervals with the appropriate dollar allowance, design, and then construction, because you can't practically do it in one calendar year. So if you take a look at the twinning as just a representative example, we proposed design in 22, and then the construction spans the 24-25 time period. We would need to go through the same kind of exercise for the pool. When do we want the pool to open? What would be the lead time necessary to do the preparatory work to allow the construction phase later to happen? We're embarking upon the Leisure Services Master Plan, and as we've identified in the report, that may provide some context to assist in informing that element, but it has been accounted for in the 10-year capital forecast. A suggested funding model comprised of development charges at approximately 33% of the cost, and the residual made up of community fundraising at approximately 1.5 million, and the residual coming out of government grants from senior levels of government, being the province and federal government, through some form of recreation campaign that we've witnessed in the past. And certainly the NDCC is a prime example of a project that received funding through senior levels of government.
I think the other thing to note is that with both the twinning of the arena and the pool, we are looking to the community to help support that project. So between the 2 projects, we are looking for community sponsorship and donations of $3.5 million. And again, giving the timelines that we've proposed, they are fairly close together. So that is something else to keep in mind as we discuss projects as well. The other thing that has been mentioned but is not included in the capital forecast at this point, because it has not been indicated by council that for certain that these projects would like to go forward, but we have been exploring them at different levels, are the ones listed on this slide. So there is the park development around the Air Ice House. There is a stormwater management plan. We have talked about that pedestrian bridge at the Nithvale Bridge. There's slope stabilization for Piper Street, and of course the pump track facility. So as of this forecast, these 5 projects are not costed out or included in the plan.
And can we put off the stormwater management?
Well, we're actually finishing up that study as we speak. So we don't know yet the full implications of what is coming out of that report. And you know, what would be the nature of those projects, what would be the cost assignment, as well as time periods. We do have other stormwater related projects built into our forecast, but specific to the community of Air and that work that's underway by IBI Engineering, we do not yet have that information. So all we're saying is, here are 5 things that have either been discussed before council or we're presently going through some level of study and analysis. We have not yet parked into the 10-year capital forecast elements related with these 5 projects. We don't
Okay,
have
so-
that information as of yet.
So what the study for stormwater management is being done, so we'll be able to assess that once it's done. And I assume next year or in the following 12 months.
It should be later this fall.
Okay. The other one is the Piper Street slope stabilization. When is
So
that
we-
assessment being done?
So council already authorized expending funds this year to do phases 1 and 2. So that work is underway. And as recently as this week, there was pavement marking to commence where we're working at the edge of the road. Phase 3 is right now carried in the 22 draft budget to fund that element. So that's the Piper Street slope stabilization, and the Nithvale Bridge. Council did allocate $100,000 this year. A report was considered by council about a month ago, and we're just going through the process of commissioning that work to better understand the structural capacity of that bridge, the effects of the thread of the water course, the Nith River, at the bridge abutments, and what improvements may be needed at water level, and then what would be the order of magnitude of costs and timing so that that bridge can be restored, renovated, and used for pedestrian trail connectivity purposes. So
But
we
what
should
we're
have some
saying is
information
These
on
are
that
not,
later this year.
right, these are not in the 10-year forecast now because we're waiting further results of the information we're gathering.
Correct.
And then they may have to slot in, which means we'll have to rejuggle the 10-year forecast once we figure out how they fall into place.
Correct. So that's
Perfect.
what we we're trying to say in that closing paragraph. They're, adding these projects will, if we want to maintain that 2% or less exposure year to year, it would mean that we would have to delay other projects, drop other projects, or modify them in some form to keep that equilibrium.
And the reason these were not added is that there is still too many unknowns with the majority of them. For example, I'll take the pedestrian bridge. We're just exploring what the cost might be or how much work might be involved in that. And then that decision would come back to council. So, 1 and 5 really tie into kind of the master leisure plan and our parks development study that's ongoing. So again, the timing for those is waiting on other studies being done as well.
The Nithvale Bridge, we also should look into funding for it. It could be really unique in crossing that it's historically a historical bridge and making it into a trail type thing. There would be all kinds of grants that we may be able to put into that. So that's something we should check into as well. As well as the Ice House Precinct Master Plan. I think there's some grants that may be out there too, under heritage and things like that. Councilor McCreary. You're on mute, Margaret.
I was just wondering about the Ice House Precinct Master Plan. The actual plan itself, we've tendered that and it was awarded and it's in progress, but I think it's been in progress now for quite some time. And I'm wondering, what is the status of the actual plan? When are we going to see something coming back to council about that?
So Miss Winter is, when on her arrival, has started to champion that project. And we've actually got a draft issues and opportunities document that we're currently reviewing. And the consultant shortly will be going into their first round of community consultation. So we will have a first cut available for council later this fall.
Okay, good. Thanks.
So in summary, we're really looking for direction from council to see if the range of projects that we have in the 10-year forecast is the direction you want the township to go, if there's any projects that should be dropped or added or modified, or really just where do we go from here, I guess, is a way to sum it up.
So if I may, number one is the sport as a leisure study, right? Will that not give us some guidance on which way we should be going? And has that been tendered yet?
So Madam Mayor, that project has been awarded. It was awarded at our meeting in July, and that work has commenced. It takes close to a year to complete that study, given the extent of work to be undertaken and the amount of community engagement that is proposed. But certainly, yes, that will help inform aspects of the 10-year capital forecast as it relates to facilities, the need for new sports systems, trails, and the like. And certainly there could be other projects that we haven't even talked about that might come out of that leisure services master plan that may have a capital build component. One of them that we've identified only because of the delegations to council to date was the pump track, but there could be other potential projects that we haven't thought about that may come through that community consultation, engagement, need identification element.
Okay, so CEO McNeely and Christina, we're talking about a 2% tax increase to go towards our 10-year capital forecast in the 2022 budget. Correct? Because we're already in 2021. So, and we won't have our answers by the time we start the budget process. Also, it's kind of nice that if you're starting it before the impact results come down, because people are going to be hit by a high tax increase when impact comes in. And don't want to add insult to injury. So if we did a 2% this year, And then we get the studies, because a lot of studies are coming in next year. We've got the master plan for the ice house coming in. We've got the final stuff regards to the Piper Street slope, as well as stuff from the Nithvale Ridge. The only thing we can't touch is the Public Works Depot. And I'll tell you why. It's been deferred since 1990. And we gotta get it on going. It's ridiculous how long we have put this off. So that one, in my opinion, that's the only one that can't be touched. Doesn't say we're not going to be able to do these things, but it's going to be based on good, solid planning information, based upon the people we have hired to give us the information. So as of right now, my opinion is we're going to leave everything as is until we get information. Then we have to look at it and reevaluate once we get the necessary information, which is going to come in within the next 6 months to a year. And is that fair to say?
So there is a significant amount of work underway. They're obviously at varying stages, but yes, I think it's fair to say there'll be more truth information available as we present a draft document in December for consideration then in the January, February 22 horizon. And there'll be other pieces that will become available later in 22 that will inform the middle to back end of the 10-year capital forecast. I think it's important to recognize that the 10-year forecast is a fluid document. It does try and identify those key capital projects that are needed to either support the current community or to accommodate the projected growth that occurs. And obviously, as information becomes available, priorities change, the schedule has some elasticity to it, and the adjustments are made. And in some cases, it's just priorities of council as well, based upon what you're hearing on the street. But we do use this document to inform and better articulate the need for transfers to reserves. We use it to better understand opportunities where grant opportunities may be pursued. And when certain grant opportunities present themselves, we always take that scan back to the 10-year capital forecast and see how that aligns with council's priorities. But we also use it to inform investors and those that are looking at building into the community, because there may be some sequencing that they need certain opportunities for infrastructure or whatever to make their project successful. So it's an education tool. It helps us develop our funding strategy. It helps us look at government grants, but of most important, it's part of our long-term strategy so that we do not have peaks and valleys in terms of our annual funding. We're trying to, as best as possible, flatline it and be consistent from one year to another.
So, Christina, and you're going to hate this question. If we're talking at 2% just to deal with the 10-year capital forecast, what ballpark figure are you thinking for the budget? And I'm hoping you're going to say cost of living. I wouldn't want to go any higher than that.
So, Madam Mayor, I'm going to interject. The report the council just dealt with a few moments ago actually identified what we are asking as our upper limit for 2022. So we've identified that CPI presently is tracking greater than 3%. And we are looking at less than 3% for our 22 forecast. And that was what was identified in that staff report as our upper threshold.
Okay, so 3%. So we're talking a 5% tax increase.
No.
Oh, that includes the 2%?
Yes, that's
God bless you. Okay.
when we come to.
Feel much better now.
So we fund our capital forecast through our operating budget, and it's done as a transfer to reserves.
Perfect.
So what we've identified is our envelope in which we would operate and prepare a draft budget for council's consideration. And then council, once in receipt of the document, will do what council does in terms of dropping projects, shifting priorities, perhaps adding projects, whatever the case may be. But our
So, Andy,
initial direction is no more than 3%.
let me speculate on something. So, we have all these plans and we're gonna do the 3% and the budget's going well and the plan looks like we can carry everything. And then a disaster happens. A road crumbles. One of our buildings collapses. Lightning strikes something. Are we prepared for a disaster? Still
So-
within this?
So yes, we have purposely not utilized our permissive abilities under provincial legislation for debt financing. Remember, we talked
So-
about flexibility.
Yeah. So if we,
We have monies put away in reserves for certain types of storm events.
okay,
We have insurance coverage. So if a building is damaged because of a storm, so there are different elements that are in place. And, the reality is if a certain road accelerates its deterioration and we have to move it up in our forecast, then another project may get delayed as we work within our spending ability and capacity. Please also understand that, and if you go to our schedule, C, infrastructure for public works, we've identified a whole series of projects that are funded in the 10-year capital forecast. They make rehabilitation to some of our existing bridges, like Jedburgh, Pipers, the Footbridge, the Greenfield West Bridge. We have our annual road resurfacing rehabilitation program. We are proposing to spend over $14.8 million just on renewal of existing roads. And on top of that, there are specific projects like Butte Street, Hall Street, McDonald, Manley, that are proposed to be reconstructed and would be additional dollars above and beyond that annual allowance of just resurfacing or repaving part of the existing road network.
I think the other important thing to know is this is a living document. It's not static. It's not a point in time and we're done and we never touch it. We're constantly reviewing it. As CEO McNeely said, at our senior management teams, when we hear of a new grant, we look at it to say, which one does this fit? Do we need to move it up? Do we move it back? To your point about disasters, I will mention the washrooms. We had, unfortunately, that fire at the washroom and it had to come down and we moved the project early. We have insurance paying for some of it. So we do adapt as things happen. This is just a tentative plan, if you will.
I just wanted to see, and it looks like, this looks like a good plan. It really does. And it looks like we've got enough safeties in place should anything happen outside the plan. And now we're waiting for further information and further knowledge from all the studies we've put out for. And then we will reevaluate this plan based upon the studies and everything else. I'm quite comfortable with that. Councilors, any questions? Margaret, go ahead. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, I would like to, we're talking about delaying projects, canceling projects. I got a project I think that we should be actually accelerating or moving forward, but it's a relatively small project. I'm looking at the restoration of the Ayr Ice House. I would like to see us actually starting to do some work on it in the 2022 year, which would be next year, because 2024 is the Ayr bicentennial. And the restoration of the Ayr Ice House would be a very good signature project. I would like to see that project, rather than just having the money being set aside in reserves, that we actually take some of that money and allocate it for a capital expenditure in 2022, and also add to that money the prospect that we can get some capital grants. So right now we have, there's $25,000 was set aside for the Air Ice House in 2021. And we were also going to set aside this year $27,500. So that's $52,500. If we were to apply for some grants, maybe we could get a matching capital grant for about the same amount of money. So we would have a pool of money of about, say, $105,000. So we've always known that this project is going to have to be done in stages. We're going to do it all at once. We do it gradually in stages. And we would want to get it done in time for the anniversary. So I was wondering if it wouldn't be a good idea if we moved some of that money sort of into the 2022 column so that we would be able to utilize it in 2022.
Sorry.
This would not increase taxes in any way, because we were going to allocate that money to reserves, and then the grants would come in, would be additional money coming in. It's not taxation money. So this way we could get the project started. We'd have something like as a placeholder there in 2022, so that if we do get some grants coming in, we decide what steps need to be taken for the ice house, we can go ahead and do it, because the money is sitting there as a capital expenditure for 2022.
Margaret, what happens if we don't get a grant for it? If we're not successful? Because would we start phase 1 and 2 if we know we can't finish it? Would that?
Well, what I want to do is just make sure that there is money there in the budget as a placeholder. We may not spend it all in 2022, but at least we would be able to start doing some work, in the sense that we would be able to do some analysis of what needs to be done. We could go out and start to get some quotes. We could investigate what grants are available, and then see if we can apply for them and see if we are successful. But without having that money as a capital expenditure for 2022, council or the township isn't authorized really to start work on the project. So what I would like is a placeholder put there of this amount of money of $105,000, so we have some room to actually start to do something.
CEO McNeely.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through to Councillor McCreary. You're quite correct. As part of the deliberations in 2021, Council asked us to put aside monies each year into a dedicated reserve to allow for the refurbishment of the exterior of the Air Ice House, and to restore it to return key elements of that historic facade. Council may recall in 2020 or late 2019, we had a structural assessment undertaken of the building, and the study author made certain recommendations in terms of sequencing of some tasks, and then order of magnitude of costs based on different elements. I have not returned back to the Heritage Advisory Committee, and that probably should be on my to-do list. And the premise of putting aside money was to, once again, as either grants became available or we prioritized one or more tasks coming out of that structural assessment report, we would bring the dollars out of reserve in that year and undertake that scope of work. So I haven't returned back to the Heritage Advisory Committee to see, what would be the priority for fiscal year 22. But that's an element then that could show up in the draft budget when we release it in December. So I have a homework assignment to return to the Heritage Advisory Committee, because part of it is buy-in from that committee, because they were going to assist us, excuse me, in terms of trying to secure grants from either foundations and or senior levels of government that may be tailored toward heritage restoration.
So Andrew, if I hear you correctly, you're saying to Margaret, yes, we are moving it up. You're on mute.
I don't want to prejudge what the Heritage Advisory Committee may be making as a recommendation, but certainly that was the premise. And the 2024 anniversary is certainly a milestone, and there could be, this would make a significant backdrop in the context of whatever unfolds in terms of 2024 celebrations that will be done locally.
Thank you. See, Councilor McCreary. You keep flipping.
Yes, I would like to add that there is a federal pool of money available for heritage restorations that's specifically tied to communities that are celebrating major anniversaries or events.
Bonus.
But what's tied to that is that you actually have to apply for your grant before the anniversary. Like, we can't wait till 2025 or 2026 when we have more money in our reserve. We need to do that like 2022, 2023, get this going and apply before our anniversary. So there is a really good opportunity to get some significant funding, but we can't wait.
So CO McNeely's he's going to put it on his calendar now to talk to the Heritage Group. And as soon as they rubber stamp it, we're going to make the application for that grant. Look at Christine smiling. Councilor Rollerman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just sort of to add to Councilor McCreary's comments, one of the things is that the Ice House is a township facility. We do have a certain amount of maintenance that should be undertaken. The parging, for example, is in pretty bad shape. The building is falling into disrepair quickly. So as much as I want to, wait for grants and all that sort of thing, there is some maintenance that we should look at in the short term that needs to be done. And I know we have money set aside in reserves and whatnot for that. So I don't want to put all of our efforts into securing grants for large restorations. And that's kind of the reason why Margaret suggested breaking it down to $25,000 per year, because there are some projects that are a little bit smaller that if we break it into smaller pieces, we can get some of that work done. I don't want to just wait 10 years and then the building is falling down completely. I think we should look at piecing it out a little bit and doing some of these smaller projects along the way.
So the first step is that CO McNeely will talk to the Heritage Group, and that will happen within the next month or two. The next step will be the plan on what needs to be done now, and the plan on the grants and getting the grant application happening. So in the next 6 months, this whole thing will have a plan and layout and process, including what you said, Councilor Rollerman. The plan includes what we need to do immediately to keep it safe and to protect it, and going forward to the restoration that Councilor McCreary is talking about. That's about right, CEO McNeely?
Yes, it is. I mean, our biggest success as it relates specifically to this project was having that structural assessment and the game plan done by an independent third party. And it has made certain priorities, both to maintain the integrity of the existing building so it doesn't continue to deteriorate, as well as a vision to restore and rehabilitate, to recapture some of those earlier architectural features that made this building unique. So that study had a dual lens, and it's just now a matter of working with the committee and identifying what opportunities exist and what does that look like for 22, 23, 24. Council made the prudent decision as part of the deliberation of the 21 budget to start putting money toward that longer term vision. Now it's a matter of activating those dollars that council has identified for 21, and the commitment that's notionally shown in the 10-year capital forecast to continue to grow those dollars, given the magnitude of work that's needed to properly restore this building going forward.
Excellent, excellent. Are there any other questions? I think you guys did a great job tonight. I really thank you. That PowerPoint was wonderful. I'd love a copy if I could have. Councilors, would you like a copy of that PowerPoint? You don't have to. Pam, did you want one? I thought I saw you nodding. Yes, I would love a copy. And Margaret wants a copy as well. Rod, would you like a copy of the PowerPoint? Yeah, that was so well done.
We will send it out to members of council tomorrow morning.
Thank you. Councilor Gillespie first, then Councilor McCreary.
Yes, I think it's a very good plan. I'm still questioning the need for a town hall. As it stands now, are most of the staff coming back into the office at some time or another? Or is this something that we can put off because there's so many other things that are coming up? Like the public works, I think really should be moved up because that's, as Mayor Foxton has said, it's been delayed quite a bit and the buildings are in ill repair there. And I think that should be moved up. I think that should be the number one priority rather than a town hall.
Well, before CEO McNeely speaks, with the new staff complements that come in with the placing of the replanner and the new CSR and everything else, I will probably have to give up my office and we work remotely and only come in and use the boardroom because there's no more room for staff. I'll have to give my office up to a staff member. We are stretched to the max. CEO McNeely?
So, Madam Mayor, I actually have a report done on the town hall. I was going to bring it as part of last night's agenda, but given the heavy agenda, I pushed it out to the meeting in September. So there is a report coming to council on the town hall project. We do need a building. We are making some options available to council that would look at different ways the building could be created, as well as order of magnitude square footage, with the premise of making it scalable so that you don't have to incur all of the expenses of a build initially, and that as need is warranted, 10 years out, 20 years out, whatever the case may be, modular additions can be added to it to make it scalable, and therefore containing costs of the present period. We have also identified in that report, and I'll go into in further detail as part of that September presentation, but we've also looked at different ways of using space, including some of the lessons we learned coming out of the pandemic and the premise of some elements of work from home continuing, whether it be on a part-time or a full-time basis for certain positions. Some job opportunities do lend themselves from a work from home basis, while others, there really does need to be an in-presence aspect to be successful. And so we've identified certain positions where that work from home or part-time work from home may be appropriate. And that does also lower square footage costs. And, obviously from a capital perspective, the smaller we make the building, the lower the capital cost. But it also has an implication every day, every year thereafter, because it's less space to clean, heat, cool, and provide lighting. And, that's an annual operating cost, and that's forever. And so we've also tried to turn our mind to how to lower exposure and overhead to operate the building once it's constructed. And so all of those elements are built into the analysis. And I'm hopeful that council will have a good, robust discussion in September on that report. We did have money set aside in 21 to kick off the program, with the build notionally underway in fiscal year 22. As it relates specifically to the Public Works Depot, we had seed money put aside in the 21 budget. Ms. Robinson is leading that project, and we've actually just received in the last week a geotechnical report, because we've actually had to go out and truth potential sites within our current property where we notionally may look at putting buildings going forward. So we've started the work on the Public Works Depot, utilizing that seed money that council set aside this year, with the premise that we would be phasing the construction of the Public Works Depot, with the first element being in 22. I believe there's roughly 660,000 set aside, which is to create modular office space for our staff out at the Public Works Depot, where appropriate showers, lunch rooms, meeting space can be accommodated. And then later phases are renovating existing buildings and building new buildings for the fleet and the equipment, fuel depot, and similar things. So those are identified in the report. They are certainly elements that are identified in the first 3 to 4 years of the capital forecast. But work has started this year based upon some of that seed money that council has set aside, which will inform what the build would look like. And those reports will be presented to council later this calendar year.
See, and if I may, 7 years ago, we were supposed to start the town hall. And I said to the residents that we would defer. We were in such a mess. And we were to defer for 2 to 3 years. Now it's 7 years. So, and we have grown that much more. And this council and the past council has done a damn good job. But we have to now move forward. We're busting at the seams. We're manipulating every little space we can. A lot of the community says we should not be at the NDCC, that it is a sports complex. But that being what it is, I think that the plan is good right now. Councilor McCreary and then Councilor Roman.
I actually have a question about development charges and the use of development charges for the twin pad. I believe CEO McNeely said that we could not use development charges for the twin pad. I'm looking at page 11 of our big spreadsheet. And down in the funding section, development charges in the year 2025, when the twin pad is built, there's $622,000, $622,950. That is actually part of the twin pad financing. So I think that the spreadsheet must be in error.
So, yeah, the lines aren't numbered, Andrew, but it's, well, you see it in the bottom section where it says funding and development charges, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth column over.
Yes, under 2025. That's part of, you look at the total cost of the twin pad is 13,581,000 and change. That's
Is
part
that
of it.
Is that
So
just for the twin pad, or is that for all those items in 2025? That's for all those items in 2025.
Well, you
Not
can
just the
take the
twin pad.
specific items and add them up. So you add up the government grant, 7.2 million, the donations, the debt, park transfer, and development charges, and that's what gives you the 13.5 million. That's the cost of the twin pad. So it is built into the cost of the twin pad, and I believe we have said we can't do that.
So what's happened is we moved a project that was DC eligible and we didn't move the funding to match with it.
Oh, it's just in the wrong column.
Correct.
Okay,
It's
so
slotted
where
in the
should that
wrong-
be?
It's slotted in the wrong year.
Which year should it
I'll
be?
have to go back and look at all the links. Problem is, every time you move one thing, it affects other places in the spreadsheet. So I'll have to have work with Christina to find where that money linked to another project, but it's out of sequence in that year.
Okay, I guess that something needs to be corrected. That's fine.
Yep.
Yes. Apologies for that.
Councilor Roman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was just thinking about the comments the CAO made about the town hall. We don't know what the workforce is going to look like post COVID-19. I'm really concerned with making the town hall too small. I know that the plan 8 years ago called for a town hall that would house the staff for exactly what our complement was at that time. And we realized very quickly that if we grew, we'd have no room. So I'm concerned that if we say people are never going to go back to the office, they're never going to go back to working in an office environment, therefore let's make a little tiny town hall. And then we find out 4 years from now that everybody is sick and tired of Zoom meetings and they want to go back to the office, then we're going to be in trouble. So whatever we decide to do with the town hall, which I think is an important project, it should be scalable at the very least, so that if over time people start to migrate back to the work in the office, then we can expand the building, maybe modular, or have workspaces that can be reconfigured. I don't want to err on the side of making it too small and then regretting that.
That's right, because you're looking at the town of Air itself growing. You're looking at the township on a whole growing by 2031 and beyond. And I mean, our road staff are going to be increased, our public works staff will be increased, and our buildings, our staff within the complex itself will be increased. So we have to meet the needs, but let's wait and see what CO McNeely's plan is, and then we can pick them apart then.
I'd appreciate if we could, because then I would have those spreadsheets. And, you know, we've modeled out to the staff complement that we see to 2031. And then the space assigned to each of those functions. And then we've given 3 different scenarios as to what those square footage demands would be. So, you know, Councillor Roman, your point about, you know, being overly aggressive and penalizing ourselves 3 to 5 years down the road, you know, is valid. We have put some cautious estimates in place, but there's simple things like hoteling, you know, where a workstation is shared amongst 2 people. So let me use the building division just in isolation. They need to be present because of obviously doing inspections on a daily basis. But maybe they're scheduled so one is in the office through the morning, returning phone calls, updating their files and records and their building logs. The other's out doing inspections. And in the afternoon, they flip and the same workstation is used, but who was in the office is now outside doing the inspections, and who was out doing the inspections is now updating their records in the office. So it's trying to utilize space more effectively, and it tailored to different jobs. Not each job can requires the same kind of space or the workstation. And so we've tried to, as best as possible, segregate and identify what those opportunities may look like.
Councilor McCreary.
Oh, thank you, Mayor Foxton. I have a question about the signs that are out at the 401 Highway 97 Business Park. I think this township owns them. They're township asset. And I understand that this capital document here is supposed to be a list of all our assets. Those signs are in, it's not a list of all our assets. Those signs are in a very bad shape, actually. They're kind of disgraceful. They're really not a good introduction to the township. If you were coming here to invest some money and you saw those signs, the phone numbers are all out of date. In fact, it says phone North Dumfries. You phone that number, it's the old town hall. It doesn't even work anymore. The signs are falling off. A lot of the businesses are no longer there. I'm just wondering if maybe there should be something done with those signs to maybe spruce them up a little bit, maybe make them look a little bit less abandoned and shabby, because it doesn't reflect well on the township.
They were built in 1998 when Joe was mayor. Lee, do you have any comments?
I noticed those signs as well when I came to the township, and we've been investigating. Unfortunately, the way they were constructed, it's not a very easy thing to fix and switch. So we asked for some creative solutions so that we're actually going to be able to do that. I'm just waiting for the final quotes now, so that we'll actually be able to do that. So that's already on some of staff's agenda for this year as well. And we'll be bringing back a report once we have an idea of the costs associated with it.
Thank you. And before Councilor Roman,
That's
Councilor
good.
Roman and I met with Andrew a couple years ago about those signs, and we said we had to do something. When they were constructed, the plates were so small, you'd have to be driven right up to them to see what the number was. It was just poorly done. Councilor Roman.
Yeah, that was exactly my point. You're right. I don't think anybody really needs to have that directory on those signs. that can just come right off and just have the name of the business park on each sign. That's all people really need to know. You're going into the Wade On Business Park. You don't need to have a directory of all the businesses that you can't even read. So I'd be happy if the staff could just have the township logo or a new phone number or website or whatever, and the name of the business park. That's all you need there, really. Something that looks nice when you come off the 401. Welcome to North Dumfries, as opposed to this falling down sign.
Perfect. Sounds good. Is there anything else, ladies and gentlemen? I don't want to jinx this, but this has been one of the best 10-year capital forecast meetings we've had in quite a while. So moving on then, can I have the motion, please?
I have a quick question, Mayor
Oh,
Fox.
go ahead, Councilor Roman.
One thing I wanted to just mention was I've noticed that the city of Kitchener is building multi-use trails down Fisher Hallman Road heading south from, right now I think they're at the roundabout at Bleems Road. So they're quite a ways away. But I know their plan is to eventually have this trail come all the way down to New Dundee Road. So that's probably, 10, 15, who knows how many years away, depending on growth. Should the township at the same time be thinking about a matching sort of trail system coming up from, say, Roseville or up from Ayr to connect with the Kitchener Trail? Because eventually there will be a pool in the south end. There will be a bus stop in the south end. People could cycle from Ayr, from Roseville up to Kitchener and put their bike on the front of the bus and go right into Kitchener, go right into the pool, go right into downtown. So I know this is a ways away, but maybe we should be thinking about connecting our trails with the Kitchener trails that are coming south, or maybe even with the Cambridge trails coming west from Cambridge. I know we've always focused on our trails just being within North Dumfries, just being joining the Village of Ayr, or just being a trail in Ward 3 or Ward 4. Maybe we need to look at the bigger picture. How can we connect our residents with the cities, Kitchener or Cambridge, or maybe, I don't know, maybe even Paris for that matter. But at least Kitchener, I see them coming down Fisher Hallman, and they're coming further and further. They will be at Huron Road before we know it. So maybe that's something to think about in the back of our minds for the next few years.
I know the plan is to take it to Schlegel Park. They're going to be hitting culverts, so that's a problem with that as well if they come further down, and so would we. But you're absolutely right. Barry used to say, I hope Cambridge builds the multi-complex by the 401 there, so he doesn't have to build the sports complex in the South Park. Well, now he has to build it. CEO McNeely.
So Madam Mayor, through to Councillor Rowland, your comment is valid. And yes, over the next decade or decade and a half, you will continue to see the continual march of urban growth in the southwest portion of Kitchener. It largely represents their last large block of greenfield development. So there is a group that has been working on a area-wide system. There's now an area-wide cycling system proposed, some built, some proposed. But our relationship with the Grand Valley Trails Association has identified opportunities, generally in a north-south orientation, that links through Brant, Brantford, and Hamilton, as well as northerly into portions of Cambridge, but into Kitchener and into the Trans-Canada Trail, which is an east-west trail alignment in the central part of, or the north central portion of Waterloo region. So some of that work is already being identified, and we've tried to cast as broad a partnership opportunity as possible to allow that to happen. But we do not at this point in time have anything along the Fisher Hallman corridor or in proximity to the Fisher Hallman corridor, nor is there anything right now conceptually mapped that would link Roseville to urban Ayr. So
And I wonder if they
those will be
can
gaps.
because of the countryside line. That's all the countryside line. They can't go past where they're building now because it's protected by our official plan and the regional official plan.
But the trail doesn't necessarily have to be within a settlement. It would be linking those existing
That's what I
settlements.
mean, Randy, would have to go along farmland, and I don't know if farmers would allow that. But we'll
But-
see.
I
pick
guess the
this up.
discussion.
I left this at the township office, guys, and it's a wonderful trail map, and bike route. Did you get one, Pam? You should have it for your crew. Another thing that,
We have talked about it in our committee, and I think I have one at the office, but I just haven't got there to pick it up
yeah,
yet.
so there, I put some in the rack. The nice thing about the trails group and the bike group on the Regional Waterloo that create this stuff, 2 of their members are North Dumfries members. It's Anne Quinn and one of her daughters. And they're highly involved in this. And so if we're looking at that, we would probably talk to Anne Quinn so that she could communicate back and forth with, instead of doing just the City of Kitchener, it'd be nice to get the Regional Waterloo involved and see if we can get them to help fund it on their trails plan. Councilor Bowman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The only other question I had was about last night's discussion that Councillor Gillespie brought up about the photo radar cameras and traffic calming. I know we have the new traffic calming measures coming in, but is there anything built in this 10-year capital forecast for those speed readers or for anything like that going forward? Is there any flexibility so we can discuss? I know I sent an email to the CEO about traffic speed readers in Oxford County, and he referenced that last night in the meeting. You know, the more permanent installations, not those temporary ones, but the permanent ones, some of which are actually, you know, in the middle of the road saying slow down or whatever, going into Platteville, for example. So I'm wondering, is there any room in this 10-year plan for that sort of thing to be included?
So at present, we have not identified significant traffic calming measures where we would put either in horizontal or vertical measures to try and modulate speed within the local township road network. Ms. Robinson has been working on a traffic calming policy, which is our intent to bring to Township Council this fall. That report looks at the principles of traffic calming, what our objectives are of traffic calming, but puts it into 3 different contexts, given the diversity of the township. You know, we have an urban area being air, and the traffic patterns and dynamics are different than the rural countryside and then our rural settlements. So we've tried to create a strategy, and I'll use the word thresholds for lack of a better word, for each of those geographic elements in our township. And from that, we would then hierarchically score and prioritize where traffic calming would be appropriate. And traffic calming is very, very diverse. Sometimes it's signage with paint on a road surface. That's an operational element and can be funded out of the operating budget. When you get into, you know, moving curb lines and you know, putting speed bumps or similar types of vertical deflection, now you're getting into larger capital dollars. And that's where the forecast as well as the annual capital commitment would require deployment of dollars. So it's now getting a better understanding of what are our thresholds, what are our priorities, and then looking at what appropriate road networks, given the 3 different types of settings in our community, where would we spend those dollars and prioritize them? And we're not at that stage yet.
Councilor Bowman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to comment that this is quite a different position we're in from 6 years ago when we were looking at big deficits and a lot of broken down equipment and whatnot. Now I feel like we're in a much better position where we actually have the luxury of being able to sit around and discuss, you know, town halls and trails. And so I just want to say to our staff, thank you for all their hard work. I think we've come a long way over the last 6-7 years. So I really appreciate it.
For sure. Okay, seeing nothing else, can I have the motion, please, Ms. Sage?
So moved by Councillor McCreary and seconded by Councillor Gillespie that FIN report number 23-2021 be received for the purposes of information, and that all comments received through the discussion at the August 10th special council meeting be returned to staff for further consideration as part of the continuing development of the 2022 budget and the associated 10-year 2022 to 2031 capital forecast. Councillor Rollman?
Yes.
Councillor McCreary?
Yes.
Counselor Gillespie,
Yes.
Mayor Foxton,
Yes,
that carries.
thank you. So we're going to reconvene into open session and then go into closed, correct?
Yes, we do have the motion to move in camera.
Go ahead.
So moved by Counselor Gillespie and seconded by Counselor Rollman that council move into a closed meeting session at 7:29 p.m. under the Municipal Act, Section 239, subsection 3, subsection 3.1, subsection A, to discuss 1, accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, AODA training for members of council. The meeting is held for the purpose of educating or training the members, Municipal Act, Section 239, subsection 3, subsection 3.1, subsection A. Counselor Rollman,
Yes.
Counselor McCreary,
Yes.
Counselor Gillespie,
Yes.
Mayor Foxton,
Yes,
that carries.
thank you. Okay, do I
We'll
have?
just take a pause for the